You're listening to Shorr Solutions, the podcast, where our expert consulting team steps behind the mic to share some of the strategies and solutions we implement for aesthetic practices nationwide. With decades of combined experience running and coaching aesthetic and medical practices, we bring you the guidance that strengthens operations, elevates profitability, and supports long-term growth. This is where solutions begin.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Shorr Solutions, the podcast. Today, I will be your host for this episode, and my name is Cristian Devoz, and I am one of the partners and a senior client success manager here at Shorr Solutions. And today, I'm joined by the legend, the myth, the man. I said that in the wrong order, but he's the man, Jay Shorr, our CEO and founder of Shorr Solutions. And Jay, what a pleasure it is to have you once again in the podcast.
Thank you. It's always nice to be a guest on my podcast.
Hey, but you know what? I do want to make this a conversation. So I feel more like this should be more like a co-hosting type of thing, right? Because today's episode is actually going to be about one of the biggest topics in the industry by far, I would say, and it's HR, right? Specifically, what's that hidden cost of not training your team in your practice? Because, you know, many practices that we work with and people that we see out there in the industry, we notice that many times they view training as an expense, you know, something that they will do when things slow down, when they get the time, or they just train people as they go. And we see a lot of this going on in the industry, but they don't realize that there is a cost to not training your people. And it goes back to a phrase that Jay always uses when he quotes Steve Jobs, right, Jay? Your Steve Jobs phrase. You always say that Steve Jobs once was asked, hey, Steve, you know, we're training all these people and then they leave. You know, that makes no sense. Why are we doing this? And then he answers, well, you know what? What will happen if you don't train all these people and they stay? And that's basically what that cost that people don't see is what we're going to be talking about, right? So, Jay, with that being said, let's jump right in. I do want to ask you the first question, and that's as simple as, where do you see the lack of training showing up in practices the most?
Well, before we begin, I would like to define what training is. It's an investment.
Right.
We say this all the time, the cost versus the investment when we speak in our financial meetings and things like that. Whereas a cost is something that you don't get any return out of, whereas an investment like the market, like in real estate and anything like that when you spend that money or invest in it, it appreciates. And that's what training is all about. Yes, it will cost you money, but it is an investment to the future. So let's get into it. You asked where the lack of training shows up, and it depends on what department. So let's start to take it from the very, very beginning when that prospective patient wants to inquire about our business. And what ends up happening, because training goes in every department, training goes with
Right.
everything, whether it's in the front, whether it's in the exam rooms, whether it's in the operating room, whether it's in taking care of your equipment and maintenance, whether it's HIPAA and OSHA. But let's start from the very, very beginning, that when a prospective patient wants to call your office. Now, understand that a prospective patient has already been on your website. So what happens is they've researched something that they were interested in. And then depending upon how good your website is, they've now become educated. And what
Right.
happens? We have never even trained our own team on every page of our website and where to navigate it and where to point a prospective patient. So when they call, they already have the answers. And by not training the staff member, it looks silly to the caller, because why is it that they're more informed than our own team? So where does it show up? Number one, the phones are handled inconsistently. Doctor's office, can you hold, please? Doctor's office, this is Jay. The name of the practice, this is Jay. How may I make your day? How may
And you
I
know,
help
sometimes
you?
they don't even say their name, right? It's just so inconsistent.
They don't say their name. They don't ask yours. You know, it's handled so inconsistently. And guess what? Then you wonder why you have a weak conversion. That
Mm-hmm.
is the market to the call. That's the first step of our wheel journey in the conversion cascade, the call. And it's handled inconsistently. So we have a weak conversion because you don't ask for their name. You actually don't ask to put them on the schedule. You wait for them. Oh, worse yet, you have no follow up system, whether it's a CRM. I don't care if it's on a notepad and a scratch paper and a book and things like that.
Hey,
You
at
have
least it should be a spreadsheet, right? At the very least, no
at least,
paper.
at least it's a spreadsheet. And there's so many programs out there. And if you need a spreadsheet for a CRM because you don't want to spend the money or invest in the CRM, we'll provide one for you. We'll create one personally. It's not as good as the tickle file electronics, but it's better than nothing if you have. So there's inconsistent follow up. You don't have a system where you call 1 day, 3 days, 5 days a week, 2 weeks. And then you may not even have it dedicated to one person. And then finally, how do you expect to upsell anything if you have a low conversion rate and there's inconsistent follow up because there's nobody to upsell to?
That's so true, Jay. And you know what? I love that you are starting with the very beginning, right? The phone call. And you mentioned something that is key. You said, sometimes it feels more like the patient is the one guiding the conversation. And we always use the example when we're training teams where we tell them, you are the pilot of this plane. Don't expect a passenger on a plane to be the one, actually piloting the plane. They don't know how to do it. They don't know what they're doing. That's why you have to be the pilot. You know how to guide the conversation. And to be able to know how to do it, you got to be trained. So it is an investment, as you mentioned, Jay. And if you know anything about investing, it is exponential. Don't expect somebody to watch a course and the next day they're going to be perfect. Or don't expect somebody to do 1 or 2 sessions of training and now the next week they are going to be doing everything perfectly. That's not going to happen. It's a constant thing every month. And if you're going to start from the very beginning, you should do it bi-weekly to begin with. And that's what we do with our clients. We meet bi-weekly, get their staff on the foundation. So this is what needs to happen. This is your phone etiquette, your customer service. This is what you need to know, your skills. And then there is a third element, which is their psychology, making sure that they have the tools to self-regulate and be able to perform at a high level because it's a stressful situation. So we have to look at those three. They go in tandem, and we want to make sure that they're trained properly on how to manage those calls. And then that is where consistency comes in. And that's when we want to do the monthly trainings. We monitor their calls, we listen to their calls, give them feedback. And then over time, we notice that improvement. Now they are at a point where you look at them and they're like, wow, it just feels so natural to them.
You mentioned something very interesting that I really hadn't planned on covering, but it's the methodology of training. Let me give you an example. I have been a trainer, whether it's a trainer or a train the trainer, most of my adult career. And I just retired from being on faculty at Florida Atlantic University in the College of Executive Education, teaching medical business management. And one of the things that I have always done when I teach, I will teach a session. I don't care if it's an hour or 3 hours. The next session is a semi review of either the last half or the last quarter of the prior session. Because before I keep moving on at rapid pace, I need to ensure the understanding of the participants who I was training, or else you know what happens that they keep going on without you and you're lost. I'll give you the perfect example. Probably 10 or 15 years ago, I wanted to learn Spanish. So I went to a high school that taught at night. And what happens? I took 2 sessions and I was doing well. I had it down. I'm going to be, speaking it fluently in another couple months. What ended up happening is I had to travel for work. And I tried my best, but they kept on going and I got lost because by the time I got back, they were already speaking Spanish and no English. And I had to drop out because I was so far behind. All right. So my point is repetition of training is always good. And even that role play.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's what we always focus on. That after we teach the basics and the foundations and the scripts and the right opening and the right call structure, now we get into role playing to make sure that they continue to sharpen those tools, right? So with that being said, let's talk now about the cost, because that's where, what this episode is really about. We want to talk about what's that hidden cost that many times we don't see. And I think the first cost, that is the easiest one to notice, is the lost revenue from treatments, the potential treatments that you could have gotten but you're not getting because you're not converting those leads, right? So that's where what Jay was saying is so important. You got to train your people to convert. They got to be consistent so that they can make sure that those patients schedule those appointments, and then you perform more treatments. So you're losing revenue but not being able to convert those patients. Now, Jay, what are other hidden costs that you have seen in a practice?
Yeah, Christian, don't we want to know why they didn't convert? If
Right.
there's a common denominator, when I'm trying to resolve issues or mistakes or errors, I always look, is there a common denominator? And the
Mhm.
training example, is it my fault as a trainer? Is it
Mhm.
my fault of the materials that we're using for training? Is it, maybe I have the wrong person? Maybe it's the wrong day of the week or the time of the day because they're all concerned and worried about the next patient and the phone is ringing. And, if you've ever been in this situation, you're doing this during a work day for the most time and you have other responsibilities and, you are in pain because if you can't get to the other responsibilities, then you're going to be behind. And
Correct.
most people don't like to be trained. All right.
Mhm.
Believe it or not, many people think, well, I was trained at my old job. I know it all. Well, no, you may know how they want to do it. So, yes, you are correct. You were trained prior. I didn't say you were properly trained. I said you
Right.
were trained prior. But I now want you to be trained on the way we do things. I don't have the
Correct.
pencils on the left side of the drawer. I have them on the right side of the drawer. So let's do it here. So the hidden costs, insufficient use of time. And we have heard from the time we were in high school and in college that time is money.
Mhm.
Because and space is money. For example, I use the old adage of the airplane. When that leaves with that empty seat, which doesn't happen much anymore, they've lost the revenue. But you have insufficient use of time. You're not training properly. You're doing it in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, not taking it seriously. There is no follow up. That's a cost when you do that. And then there's a burnout of the
Mhm.
staff, and then you have turnover. So now when you want to train, do you have to train everybody in that? Or do you have to train that individual people that you're training over and over and over again for the same positions because they come and they go and they come and they go? I see this all the time. They started, it didn't work out. And then there are fines. If we don't train, there are OSHA fines and there are HIPAA fines, and they are massive.
Mhm.
$5,000, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year if it's a major breach. So, have your employees been trained as soon as they start or as soon as they take on a new position? A, HIPAA, B, OSHA. It is mandatory, not optional. Let me repeat that. It is mandatory and not optional. Now, there's many ways to do it. You can buy a program and pay per person, or you can have a trainer come in and do it. Or we offer a program where we'll do the training. We'll actually record it for you with you. And then anytime a new employee comes, you have that recording. You can just put them in a room or everything, and it has all the forms, has everything you need for HIPAA and OSHA, and it lives evergreen until the laws change. And they haven't changed in, I don't know, ever since I've been teaching this, not a whole lot has changed. A couple issues here and there, but the fines are massive. So the hidden cost of not training can be massive. Does the staff know all the ins and outs of HIPAA? There are no excuses and there's no get out of jail free card.
That's correct. And you know what? With that being said, there are reasons why training oftentimes doesn't get done. And I will say that the first one that we see, and I mentioned it at the very beginning, is we will train as we go. And I understand that a practice can be busy and that you have so many things going on. But if you don't set that time apart to train your team, they're gonna be trained, just not by you. They're gonna be trained by the culture and what they see others do. So if they're seeing other team members having bad habits, maybe not handling the phone calls correctly, they might be able to replicate some of those bad behaviors. And before you know it, your culture is such that your team is not performing at the level where you want them to be. And that
Not they
happens.
might, they will.
They will. They will. It's like when you have a garden, right? You have a garden. If you don't do your gardening, what's going to happen?
Weeds.
You're going to get a lot of weeds, right? So it's the same thing. You might not see, your garden full of weeds in 2 days, 3 days. Maybe after a week or 2 weeks, you might start seeing some coming in. And after a few months, you will see, wow, what happened here? This is a jungle. It's the same thing in your practice. That's why it gets pushed back to the back burner so often. People don't see training as a priority until it becomes some priority. And guess what? By then, the damage is already done. And to fix it is going to take a lot more money. So that's another hidden cost of having to retrain your people, plus having to get them out of that other mindset into the mindset that you want them to get. So get it right from the beginning and make it consistent from the very beginning. Make a structure so that you have the structure onboarding, you train them on what they need to do, and you take as much time as you need for that specific position. And then once they are ready to go, now you can throw them to the wolves. Don't just give them some general information, then throw them to the wolves, because they're going to fail massively.
Yeah, Christian, you were very kind with the word reasons. I call them excuses.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
We all have excuses, right? I don't need to go further with that comment, but
Well, you always say you're coming, right? Everybody has one, right?
yeah,
I'm not going to say what it is, but
everybody has an excuse. And
right.
an excuse is a comfort level for somebody.
Mm-hmm.
So let me share a couple things. First, there's the time constraints. And many, many years ago, I heard this expression, and I've always used it grammatically so incorrect, but I ain't got time for that. All right. I don't know where that came from, but I thought it was cute. What do you mean you ain't got time for that? You better make time for that, because there are certain things that you're not going to get away with. All you're going to do is postpone the misery and the agony. And we all know what happens. It's much easier to do it right the first time. And you know what it builds when you do that? It builds culture. I come from a Fortune 100 company. Many, many years ago, I retired from there, and I was trained to the max. Every couple months, they were actually sending me away for training, management training, speech linguistic training, business psychology training, safety training, and then train the trainer training, because they realized how much I love to train. And you know what? It was a culture. So then when I became the administrator of the large dermatology plastic surgery practice that I was a partner of, I held training every week. We were closed every Wednesday afternoon and every other Friday afternoon. And people said, wow, that costs you a lot of money. And my answer was, no, I'm investing in my team. And I really have things. My team, the shortest amount of tenure was 5 years, and the longest tenure was 31 years. I didn't lose people over pennies and nickels and dimes and quarters because I paid them more dollars than anyone else in town, because I knew what everybody else was paying in town. There are ways to do that. So what you want to do is have continual training. Why? So that people take it seriously, and it's not, here comes another program. Here today, gone tomorrow. My safety programs were never gone. My training programs were never gone. Right. How to answer the phone, how to room a patient, how to check a patient out, how to advertise within the practice, how to get the most real estate for my brochures, how to have the patient engaged while they're in the office instead of wasting time. I didn't want to waste money. So there was no structured onboarding for most people. Mine was very structured, and I urge you, have it where it's clear, concise, consistent, and people take it seriously, and you have an agenda when you have your safety meetings. or your business operational and or your financial meetings so that your staff feels that you are treating this like a business. Now, just because you have people that have come from other places, that's a good reason to hire them because they have experience. It's not a good reason to keep them, but it is a good reason to hire them because you're looking for somebody that can help you hit the ground running, because it takes approximately 25% of a new employee's salary, because you have to train them. It takes approximately 3 months. 3 months divisible by a year is 25%. Easy number to do. So when you assume that they have experience, that's great for bringing them in, but don't work on their experience for your practice. Train them the way that you do because it won't get overlooked. And guess what? If you hire the right person who takes the training seriously, they will also take the people in under their wing.
Right.
I promise you, when my team and my current team now knows that training is very important, they know that safety is very important. It is a priority to them because what's important to me or what's important to my boss
It's more
is
important
more
to me.
important to me.
Right. Absolutely. And you hit on so many good insights in there, Jay. The thing that came to mind when you were talking was you have to have structure, right? But it all starts at the head of the practice of the business, right? So the leadership. Who is at the top? Is it really a boss or is it a leader? Are you a boss or are you a leader?
No, I'm a
And
leader. I'm the chief choreographer.
there you go. I love that one even better. You have us all dancing and showing us how to do it, right? You are there in the trenches, you're with your people. And I think that's what really sets a leader apart, is being able to set the way by example. And I love how you did it. You did it with me and Paige and the rest of the team, where you will show us the way. We'll shadow you. We'll see how you do it, and we'll get the best practices from you by watching you do it. And then, of course, you will throw us when you feel that we're ready into a situation where we can now put into practice the things that we're learning. So I love that structure where you define the expectations. You let us know, hey, I want you to get to this level. Cristian, I want you to be at a level where you can help me with the clients, where you can help me with finance, where you can help me with, business plans or training the client's staff. And then you reduce that dependency on you, because at the very beginning, of course, I felt like, wow, I don't want to do a meeting by myself. I needed you to be there all the time. And then, of course, while that is okay during training, once I went through that phase, you were like, hey, Cristian, it's enough. It's time for you to start, getting off the net, getting yourself out there and putting yourself, really getting yourself out of your comfort zone. And when that happened, that's when my confidence started to grow. That's when I really was able to realize, you know what, I can do this. And the more time I have worked with clients, the more I realize, I can do more. And the same goes to your practice out there, right? To those of you listening, you gotta get your people, first of all, structure so they know what the expectations are. You show them the way, you guide them, and then little by little, you reduce that dependency on you so that now they can take on more and more responsibility. They become more efficient, and before you know it, now their confidence is up there and they're able to do the job in a way that is going to maintain the level of patient experience that you really want to provide.
No, I have an expression.
Yeah.
I'm here in South Florida for those listening, and in where I come from, our professional basketball team is the Miami Heat.
Mhm.
So I use this expression. When you're hiring people, most of the time you're hiring out of need and desperation. I'm not saying that you don't do it for planning of the future. We're in the process right now working with 4 clients that are just opened up in the last month and will be opening up in the next month or 2, 4 at the same time. Some were rush hires. Others, we know that they're not going to be opening for several months, so we have time to do that and time to train before they physically open. So we're able to get a lot of the bugs out of the way. But when you hire a warm body, you're always going to be taking the heat. You hire a warm body because you have a need. I'm stuck. I need somebody right away. And you do the worst training ever.
Mm-hmm.
The worst, because you don't have time. You're in desperate need. Now, Christian brought something up very, very important for those of you out there. You might want to listen and even try this. When I knew that I had in our business plan that I had a need, which I believed would be a year down the road as we were growing, that I was going to need another person to handle finance and business plans and working with me on the spreadsheets and things like that. I found Christian. Long story short, doesn't matter how we found him, but long story short, he was an unpaid intern and in college. And he said, I don't care whether or not I get college credits for it. I just want to learn. And he worked with me as an unpaid intern. And then he became a paid intern. And then after that, and while he was doing this, he was shadowing me 100% of the time. Any call I was on, he was on. All right. Anything we were doing, he was part of it. Even if it was Anna or Pat and myself, he shadowed. Why? So he could learn it the Shorr Solutions way. So, so what was in this for Christian? He wasn't earning any money, but he said he's going to invest in himself. And then finally, when he was earning a salary, we brought him on full time after that. The clients that I was engaging with Christian shadowing finally started asking Christian questions. And I would answer, and they said, no, I asked Christian. And then they would start to email Christian and CC me instead of writing to me and CCing Christian. And that happened with one client, 2 clients, 3 clients, 4 clients, 5 clients. It just progressed where it allowed me to step back and start to do other things so that Christian could end up taking a lot of my work away. And then I hired Nan. I mean, this was a year later, and then another 2 years later, I hired Nan, who was our senior client success manager. We brought on another intern and Paige, and same thing. Paige was shadowing, and she shadowed Christian, and Christian brought her along until he kicked her out of the nest. And then she started to shadow Nan, and she's doing her own thing. And then she became a coordinator, and then she later became an advertising and marketing manager. So the reason I'm saying this is I invested a lot of time, all right, and wasn't getting anything out of it. But man, I'll say it again, man, am I cashing in on it now? Whether it's allowing me to take more time off or do other things and other businesses that I have, or it allows us to take care of more patients and generate more revenue.
Yeah, more of our clients, correct. So I love that because I was part of that story, right? I saw it firsthand. And from my experience, I can say that the best thing you can do is invest in your people, because they will thank you for that and they will stay because they notice that with you they can grow. There is a path to continue to grow and to make more money as well, and to be able to provide more value to you. And from the very beginning, set up that expectation, like, hey, you're going to do as well as you want to be, as you want to do, because the more you can bring value to me, the more I will be able to pay you for that you're bringing in, right? And if you're always setting yourself apart as far as your type of compensation, the benefits and everything like that, never forget the fact that they also need motivation, and that comes from having a future, having a plan, and a path that is clear.
It may not be in your time frame, but you're going to get there. All right. There was a gentleman that I worked with many, many years ago, and I wanted this promotions so badly, and I was passed over for the one. And he said to me, there's a reason. And I don't want to get into the reasons. It was personal in my life. He says, but you've got the tenacity. Hold on. I'll help you. I'll mentor you. And that's exactly what I did with Christian, because somebody did it for me. The only thing I ever asked Christian to do was pay it forward.
Yes. It was my promise that I made to you. One day I'll do the same for someone else.
Somebody did it for me.
Yes.
You do it for them.
And I will for sure.
So let me close with 3 very important things about what training should do. Let me summarize. I am a training geek. It's an amazing thing because here's what training should do, folks. Training defines expectations. And secondly, reduces dependency and inefficiency because I no longer have to depend on myself to do everything and generate all the money. Why? Because I depend on Christian. I depend on Paige. I depend on Nan. I depend on Anna. We are a well-greased, oiled machine, La Familia, because everybody helps one another. So my expectations, we're not dependent on one another, but we just want to help one another. And then the last thing about training, when you learn something that is going to help broaden your breadth of anything that you're going to share or teach or do in your business to make you confident, all right, you're going to go into it with a whole different level of confidence because I know it. I was taught it. I respect the people who taught me, and it worked. Therefore, I have a much higher confidence level. Christian said it earlier. He didn't want to be left alone and speak to a client because he didn't know what he was speaking about. But once he was trained, let me at him. And now I don't even show up to some of the meetings because Christian and Nan and Christian and Anna and Nan, Paige and Christian, I don't know. All right. Hey,
multiple
not like I don't show up, but I'm very confident in my team. So ladies and gentlemen, that's the ins and the outs and the ones, twos, threes about training. And Christian, I yield back.
Hey, you said it all, Jay. You said it all. So with that, we look forward to see you in the next episode, everybody. Have a great day, and we'll see you soon.
Good luck. God bless.
Before you go, new episodes are released every 2 weeks, offering perspective on the decisions, systems, and leadership behind well-run practices. For continued insight between episodes, follow us on social media at Shorr Solutions. This is Shorr Solutions, the podcast.